All right, now we're going to dive in, spend the rest of our time really talking about measuring. Everyone's heard you can't manage what you haven't measured and all those fun little sayings. When it comes to sustainability and specifically reporting and validations, your sweet spot is your boundaries. So I always recommend when you start looking at your reportings for your programs and your operations, start very wide. And as you begin to see holes or gaps, that identifies a potential boundary, right? For example, you might be able to pull energy from 6 of your 7 sites, right? So you don't necessarily want to report those 6 yet, or you do with a caveat that says, hey, we're still pulling from our next site. So really kind of the boundaries does that. It protects you from the greenwashing, and it protects you and it holds you accountable. It helps you identify so you don't overreach and overstretch yourself. The boundaries also, they help you double dip when it comes to reporting, because all the reporting agencies require you to establish your boundaries. And when your program gets mature enough that you want to start talking about a carbon goal, a net zero goal, carbon neutral, that kind of stuff, the devil's in the details, and the details is your boundaries. Like, how are you going to measure? Plus, your boundaries help you establish when you start looking at, say, a product recyclability goal, or take-back programs, or employee engagements, or community engagements. Right, the goals you set around those, you want to naturally embed your boundaries into them. All right. So again, boundaries are equally important to what you capture. Earlier, we talked about reporting, TCFD, CDP, SASB, GRI. At the end of the day, the environmental performance they ask for and the workforce and the supply chains all come from the same pools, right? The same buckets. We've listed those here. These are the big buckets when it comes to reporting and sustainability you really want to look at. We talked about the greenhouse gas emissions in your scope. Those are directly pulled from your energy bills, and then you can convert them, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole I won't go down into. What kind of energy management systems are you employing? Like, how are you identifying waste in your energy? How are you offsetting your energy? Are you partnering with utility companies for more renewables? Are you participating? Do you have on-site solar, renewables? That's when it comes to energy management. Your climate risk and opportunities is where you start. That's kind of the next evolution of a sustainability program. And that is where you're talking about and really looking at a double materiality assessment, a climate risk assessment. Because what you're doing at that point is you're looking at, okay, I've got 65 locations across the globe. I know, half of them have no risk of fire, no risk of flood from wildfire, natural impacts. And basically, maybe I've got 2. Maybe we got 2 of your 60 that have a potential, could be impacted by a change in weather, like a climate, a hurricane, a storm, a fire, all that kind of stuff. And really kind of how are you looking at that? How are you mitigating those risks? If you have a supplier that's in an area that's prone to wildfires, are you diversifying your supply chain? Really kind of how are you pulling products from different suppliers? Water resource and management, right? Water is kind of that unsung hero that no one really talks about, mainly because it's, especially in the US and Europe, it's so cheap. ROI is very hard on water, but it doesn't mean it's not important. So looking at how you're tracking water, where you're using it, where the leak's at, are you not, polluting, obviously. Waste management, that's trash. That's pretty easy. You can do that from your supply chain. You can do it in-house. You can do it in operations. Your supply chain matrix, that's a really evolving, growing trend we're seeing is, how sophisticated are your supply chains? What are they tracking as far as their sustainability, right? Are they tracking their energy? Are they tracking their social impacts? Really basically taking your sustainability program and kicking it down to your tier 1 and tier 2s, right? And figuring out how much they're measuring and having performance on. Of course, financial matrix, everybody does those. Those aren't new. They do, depends on reporting requirements. You will add the environmental lens to it as well as the climate lens to it. Of course, your workforce matrix, how they're paid, how they're protected, how, do they have a voice, collective bargaining, that kind of stuff. I mean, we talked about earlier, kind of your governance and oversight. You know, are you reporting all the way up? Is when talking to governance in this standpoint, we're talking about, is it in the KPIs, the performance, annual performance of your team, of your employees? Like, are they required to increase sustainability? That's when we talk about KPI and governance, that's what we're talking about. You know, 100% coverage of policies, all my supply chain have been vetted, yada, yada, yada. And also, how are you holding your staff accountable for sustainability and performance? That's when it comes to kind of measurements. And there's a whole laundry list of these at the back of the slides. We won't go through them now. All right, we're almost done. Just a couple more. So this is where the rubber meets the road. Right, we've learned about the triple bottom line. We've learned about the importance of green teams, reportings, don't do greenwashing, you know, but really when it comes in reporting, now it's kind of like, okay, how do you measure? The point I want to get across is in the early stages, and even like I've been with organizations that they're running global multi-million square foot portfolios and they're still doing off Excel. So don't feel you need a fancy software system to track your, especially your environmental performance. A lot of times that can be done with whatever you have in-house, you know, spreadsheets, Google Docs, whatever. Just don't overcomplicate. Just start tracking something now. I'd much rather you start tracking something now on a spreadsheet than waiting until you get funding for a super awesome program that's going to do most of it for you on the back end. Just start with something, just a simple spreadsheet. We have some pre-built, pre-canned workbooks on our website. So if you don't want to start from scratch, please hop over there and check them out. You know, really kind of help you kick the groove. But again, you don't need something fancy. Unit of measurements. Boy, this is where this is where your validation comes from, and this is where your due diligence comes from. Especially if you have a global portfolio, or even if your sites are sprinkled throughout the United States. There's not a standard billing cycle or unit of measurement requirement for utilities globally. There's just not. You could get electricity billed in different cycles, in different formats, in 2 different counties of the same state. Okay. Yes, it'll be kilowatts, you know, but the mix is different. The reporting seasons are different. So units of measurements, we've listed some of them here, as well as cycles. Right, too. So as you begin to build your spreadsheets and build your tracking mechanisms, add when the billing is. You know, especially when it comes to waste. Waste is really squirrely. Like you could have some sites that they get waste every month. You could have some sites that get it once a quarter. I've seen some clients that they get their waste, they estimate it for a month and they come back 2 months later and validate it, and it gets really muddy. So as you track your units of measurements, make sure you're including your billing cycles so to kind of allocate it. And we could talk, you know, reporting as well too, because you want to align them. But really, and these are your most common ones. Water is kilowatt hours. Energy is kilowatt hours. Water is gallons. Waste is metric tons. Safety is your total reportable incidences in fatalities. Greenhouse gas and carbon, always recommend CO2 equivalent. All right, there's a lot of free resources out there to help you figure that out. CO2 equivalent is kind of the industry standard that everybody uses. Next, I want to talk about utility conversions. You know, again, different billing cycles, different reporting. Some are PDFs, some are emails. Unfortunately, utility, getting the information depends on how big your footprint. This is a pretty labor-intensive exercise. There's really no way around it. There's been some improvements when organizations are able to screen scrape and basically link up with some utility providers. But again, current technology, when this was written, you know, really globally, or even from a US standpoint, they can only hit 40% of all the energy providers. That's not counting waste, that's not counting water, that's not counting sewer, right? So that's why it's still very much a manual exercise. This is where your green team can really shine. So enabling and empower your green team to grab the bills at the sites and open them up and plop the numbers in the spreadsheet and validate it is really a great resource for them. Again, energy to greenhouse gas. It's basically when you report it, you're gonna pull your kilowatt hours off your bills. Like, so we talk about greenhouse gas and CO2 equivalent. You pull your kilowatts off your bills for your scope 1. So these are your tailpipes and your smokestacks associated with your company. And then basically you're going to convert them to emissions factors, which can then you're going to overlay an emission factors to it. And that's going to give you a CO2 equivalent. And that CO2 equivalent is the number that goes in the report. Right. So it goes kilowatts from your bills, all of them rolled up for the whole year for each site. Each site, depends on where it is, gets a different emissions conversion calculations, right? Based off a bunch of geeky stuff that goes into it. And then that kicks out a CO2 equivalent, and you add up all your CO2 equivalents, and that's your total footprint. But again, energy, everybody reports greenhouse gas emissions. And it comes straight from your utility bill, and there's quite a few tools out there. We have some tools as well, so kind of help understand those. But again, don't overcomplicate it. Just start with a spreadsheet. You can start with a spreadsheet tomorrow. Find somebody that's super energetic to start combing through all the utility bills and start inputting the numbers into a utility bill. And from there, you can start making some cool integrations, all that kind of stuff. But don't wait for perfect. Just start measuring now. I struggled with putting this in this presentation because really the prioritization, once you've measured for a while, once you've discovered your boundaries, once you've got your policies in place and your governance and your green team in place, and this is where you're starting to really this is where you're running, right? The track is built, the car's running good, you're racing down the course. And prioritization of your program and the different initiatives is really kind of a secret sauce, and it's completely independent of your culture and your organization. I can't tell you to begin one initiative over another. We've given some basic guidelines. So basically balancing the impact of the efforts, it's just got a quick ROI, but it takes tons of resources and money. How does it align with your business goal? It might be great to do, 100% solar on a site, but you don't know if you're going to be in that site for the next 5 years or 10 years. So kind of balancing against your business knowledge or your business needs. And what are your stakeholders telling you? Because sustainability is one of those subjects that change, the nuances of it change constantly. Renewable energy is all the craze for a while, and then the customers are asking for recycled content, then end of life, so really kind of look at, once you kind of figure out what you're tracking, kind of what those opportunities are going to look like, kind of put those through the lens of what your stakeholders will view. That way you're able to kind of compound the impact of it. But again, there's no secret sauce. Unfortunately, I can't give you a secret recipe to put your priorities through. It'll spit them out. Just kind of balance them against what you know. Where's the business going? Because no one knows that better than you. And of course, what's your market? What's your stakeholders will tell you? Of course, we'd be happy to vet any ideas you have with us. Well, this wraps it up. I hope this time was valuable to you. I hope you learned a lot. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions, or if you got any improvements, please let us know. Because really it is, as I mentioned earlier, it's really my desire to help put sustainability in a level of understanding that everyone can use, because it's not rocket science. I say this all the time on LinkedIn. Sustainability is not rocket science. It's really looking at each decision you make through the lens of the financial performance of it, the environmental impacts of it, and the social impacts of it. Keep it simple. Keep your sustainability simple. It's not rocket science. Again, thank you so much for your time. Please reach out with any comments or questions, and we'll look forward to and share your success. I'd love to hear your success and what you learn out of this. Thank you so much. Bye.